Hello everyone, welcome to Retarget Common Tube channel. I am Amod and this will be another video in this assured end-to-end framework playlist. So in last videos I have already created one test case using restassured, and using that test case I am creating the framework. I have already explained in my previous videos. So here I have discussed some disadvantages of this approach, and from here I am deriving what I need to create as a part of framework. So here if you see, one major drawback or major disadvantage here, that I am hard coding the endpoint, right, like this. So let me give you an example of real time. This is some dummy API which I am using, but in real time you might have the API based on your environments, like for QA, for dev, for pre-prod or prod kind of things. So maybe suppose if you want to test in QA environment, so actual API might be qa.api. Possible in real time it happens actually. It's suppose if same API if you want to use in dev, then it will be like instead of QA it will be dev, and so on. One major challenge in API automation framework is how to maintain the endpoint. One approach we'll see everywhere, like people will simply do like parameterize this one. Instead of QA they'll put something env, and at the runtime they will replace this environment by the environment passed by the end user. But I think this approach is okay, but sometimes you need to store some data with respect to environments, like some username password or some any ready-made data or some hardcore data kind of thing we need to store as per environment. So what I feel that instead of using this parameterization, I feel we should have a separate folder structure that I will show you now. What I'm going to do in IntelliJ, inside the project under the test, and I will create another project, another folder here or package that will be resources. Here I will add a new package again, and package I will simply give airline. Inside this what I'm going to do, I will create environments. Like suppose here I don't have dev or QA or some different environment, but as of now I will simply assume that I have dev environment and I have one QA environment. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a JSON file, and JSON is also really very easy to use as well. So what I am going to create a JSON file here. I will name it as airlines API data dot JSON. Now let me create a JSON object, and I will create a property here, maybe create airline endpoint. Okay, I gave the key, and in this key I will add this endpoint in double quotes. Similarly, for here if it is like actual QA API, then it should be QA.api or whatever API is possible for that environment. At many places you might have some different way of representing QA or dev or different environment API. Okay, so in that case you can store those links, those endpoints here, and also it will help you to store any environment specific data. Same thing for I will do for dev as well. In both the JSON file, in both environments, name will be same. Okay, just the value will be changing. Here if it is for dev, then it should have some different environment. Okay, in real time you will get the same thing, and you should implement in this way. Instead of parameterizing the URLs, it is better to use like this way. We need to read this, right? But before that I need to have something which will help us to read this or read the data from this JSON file. Like if you have used the properties file here, you need to create utility, right? We have properties class, from there you need to load and then you need to read the value. Okay, similarly, since it is a JSON, I will create a util which will read a JSON file as a map, so that we can directly use the key and we can get the value. Okay, so similarly we need to read any JSON file. That might be requirement in my framework, because someone wants to pass the payload from a JSON file. For that also they need to read. Okay, so it is good to create a utility, and that utility should be part of framework, because that is not specific to your application, because reading a JSON file can be used for any other applications, any other APIs. Okay, that's why I will create that utility as part of framework. But before that, what I'm going to do, instead of this utils, I will rename this package. Okay, I will rename this package to rest utils, and I will create another package, and this package name I will give utils. I will show you why I am giving this one, because in this package I will keep all the utils which is not related to restassured. So here I will create a Java class and maybe I will name it as JSON utils. Okay, so all JSON related util methods I will create here and I will keep here. So what I want to do, I want to read this .json file as a map. Why map? Because this is a JSON object, so that I can use the key and I can get the value. Okay, so let me create a utility and I will name it like public. Again static because it is util, so we should directly call it using the class name. Public static, not void. I will do map, then string. Okay, then get JSON data as map. So what we required from what parameter we required? We required where my file or what is the file name. Okay, so string JSON file name. So we can establish a pattern as well, because we are expecting that all the resources should be, or all these files should be part of your resources, right? Resources means some data which is required to run your test cases. So what I'm going to do, I'm assuming that we are storing all the data files here under the resources. So what you can do, let me create the complete path. We can use class loader to also read the file, but let me go with simple one. So I will use system dot get property and here I will use user dot dir. Okay, so it will give me the path till my root folder. Okay, till here. Okay, and we know that it is inside src test resource and then, right? So I will simply write src test resources and then I will expect that user will pass me the file name. Actually they need to pass the relative path from resources. Okay, because I can assume that only that file will be present in the resources folder, but you need to give the relative path from resources. So to read a JSON file as a map, we require JSON. That dependency I've already added in my pom.xml. In JSON, we have a class called object mapper. Remember, we need to import it from JSON data file, not from restassured. So import it from JSON. Then let me initialize it. New object mapper. Since I'm going to create the utility as static, so I will simply do private static. In object mapper class, we have a method called read value. Here you can see it's overloaded method, and we can pass the file, source file as well to read the data from. So I will do new file and here I will pass the complete file path. And since I need to read it as a map, so for that I will use the new type reference. And please remember, I have already explained this type reference concept in my restassured concept playlist. Please go and watch if you have not watched that video. But if you want to read a JSON file as a map, so we just need to pass a new type reference. Okay, and we can cast it to map. This read value will give you exception, so let me add it to method signature. Now once we have read the data as a map, let me return the data. So we created one utility, and the same utility I'm going to use in my test case. So here the test, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use map string data. So I will use JSON utils dot get JSON as map, and here I need to pass the path. Suppose I want to use from QA. So let me copy the relative path. So you can go to copy path reference. You can see here, I'm going to copy this one and you can modify. I need to add the exception again. Okay, so read the file. So now we can use, instead of hard coding this one, we can use data dot get, and we know that in which variable we are storing the create airline endpoint. This is the key. I will simply use it here. Okay, let me run this program and let's see whether it runs or not. Okay, so it ran and it is giving some 400 error, which we are already seeing, right? That ID we didn't change. Okay, so we are able to read the data from JSON file. Now you will ask, you have hard coded the QA here. What if I need to use dev or some different environment? What I need to do? In that case, actually, we need to we have two ways. First way is like you can pass that environment value at runtime. Generally we do using the Maven or a Gradle if you are using. So same thing we should do here also. So it is always a good practice to pass the data which is required to configure a framework to run on some different environment, different suite file, anything from your command line. But it is also a good practice to handle something or provide a default value if some value is not provided by the command line. Means what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that I will create one variable string environment. I will lead the command line argument like system.getProperty environment, okay, which we'll introduce later. If we are passing this environment value from command line, okay, or from pom.xml, if you are, I will discuss that later. If this is null, okay, means we are not passing any environment from command line argument. In that case, instead of, we will assign some default value. So equal to null, then use QA or anything you can answer, like by default in which environment you want to run. Then if it is not provided, or sorry, if it is provided, then use whatever you have passed. Okay, simple tertiary operator I am writing. If you are not passing the environment from command line argument, then use QA. If it is passed, then use the whatever they have passed. Okay, and instead of hard coding the environment, I will use here. Okay, now let me run the program, and this time let me change the ID so that I should see some greenery. Okay, so this time it is green and we can see it's working fine. Okay, so in this case we are not passing it, right? We are not passing any environment variable called env, so it is taking by default QA. Okay, just to test this code, what I will do, I will simply hit QA1. This time it should throw any error. Let me show you what. Okay, it is giving error and you can see file not found XML because it is putting QA1. Okay, so this means our code is working. So you can see how I am uplifting my framework step by step. First we wrote very simple, very generic code. Then we are deciding what is good for our test cases and how we can develop the framework. So in next video, I will show you that how can we run this test case through pom.xml. Okay, so if you have any doubt, please comment on this video. If you really like my videos, please like, comment, subscribe and share with others. Thank you everyone.